Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Bangladeshi Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has resigned and fled to India after weeks of student-led protests. Bangladesh's army has announced an interim government will be formed to run Bangladesh. Earlier today, crowds stormed Hasina's official residence in Dhaka to celebrate her ouster. She'd led Bangladesh since 2009. Her father was Bangladesh's first president. On Sunday, police violently cracked down as tens of thousands of protesters took to the streets. Almost 100 people died on Sunday, bringing the death toll in recent weeks to over 300. Most of those killed have been student protesters. Hasina resigned as protesters vowed to defy a military curfew and stay in the streets.
Nobody can stop us from marching today. If we turn back and face them once, we will liberate Bangladesh. And I want to tell my armed forces brothers not to align with the autocrat. Either you're with the people or stay neutral.
We'll have more on Bangladesh after headlines. The U.S. has sent additional military forces, warships, and fighter jets to the Middle East as Israel braces for a possible retaliatory attack by Iran and Hezbollah. Last week, Israel assassinated Hamas's political chief, Ismail Haniyeh, in Tehran, as well as a top Hezbollah commander in Beirut. A number of countries, including the U.S., France, and the U.K., have urged their citizens to leave Lebanon as fears grow of a broader regional war. President Biden is planning to meet with his national security team today. In Gaza, at least 30 Palestinians were killed Sunday when Israel attacked two schools sheltering displaced people in Gaza City. Officials in Gaza said 80% of the victims were children. The attack came a day after Israel struck another school in Gaza City, killing 16 people. Israeli forces also attacked the courtyard of Deir Abbas al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital, where displaced Palestinians were living in a makeshift tents, which caught on fire. At least 5 Palestinians died.
They
said Al-Aqsa Hospital was safe, and we stayed in Al-Aqsa Hospital because it was supposed to be safe. We were sleeping, believing it was safe, and suddenly a rocket hit, setting the tent on fire. A woman who was this child's mother was killed. She was hit by a shrapnel in her back and died on the spot, martyred where she stood.
Israel also carried out airstrikes on the occupied West Bank Saturday, killing 9 Palestinians in the city of Tulkarem. Hamas said 3 of the victims were members of its military wing. In the UK, unrest is growing following the deadly stabbing of 3 girls last week in the northwestern town of Southport. At least 8 other children and 2 adults were injured in the attack on a children's dance class, many of them still in critical condition. The attack stoked violent far-right protests across Britain after early misinformation identified the suspect as an immigrant living in the UK without documentation. The 17-year-old suspect was, in fact, born in Cardiff to Rwandan parents. Over the weekend, rioters raided and set fire to hotels used to shelter asylum seekers in northern England. Violent protests also led to some 150 arrests, with incidents reported in Hull, Liverpool, Bristol and Belfast, among others. Anti-fascist protesters have also gathered to counter the white nationalists. On Sunday, Prime Minister Keir Starmer condemned the, quote, far-right thuggery.
People in this country have a right to be safe, and yet we've seen Muslim communities targeted, attacks on mosques, other minority communities singled out, Nazi salutes in the street, attacks on the police, wanton violence alongside racist rhetoric. So no, I won't shy away from calling it what it is: far-right thuggery.
The Democratic National Committee has announced Vice President Kamala Harris has won enough votes from delegates to secure the party's presidential nomination. The DNC is holding a virtual roll call ahead of the Democratic National Convention, which begins in 2 weeks in Chicago. Harris is expected to name her running mate today or tomorrow. Over the weekend, she interviewed 3 top candidates: Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, U.S. Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona, and Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. She also met with Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg for 90 minutes Friday. In other campaign news, Donald Trump has dropped out of a planned presidential debate on ABC scheduled for September 10th. Trump now says he'll debate Harris, but only if it's hosted by Fox News. In other Trump news, the Washington Post has revealed Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi may have secretly given Donald Trump a $10 million bribe in 2017. The Post reveals 5 days before Trump took office, an organization with ties to Egyptian intelligence withdrew $10 million in cash from the National Bank of Egypt in Cairo. According to the Post, former Attorney General William Barr helped block an FBI probe into the deal. We'll have more on the story later in the broadcast with Washington Post reporter Carol Lenig. In Sudan, the Rapid Support Forces killed at least 23 people Saturday in a shelling on the besieged North Darfur city of El Fasher, as the paramilitary group struggles to gain full control over Darfur. Aid groups warn the spiraling humanitarian catastrophe in Sudan could engulf the entire region after famine was declared in the Zamzam camp for displaced people located outside El Fasher. At least 10 million people have been displaced amid Sudan's brutal civil war. This is a woman at Zamzam.
Since we came to Zamzam, nothing has been provided to us by the organization, and we are suffering from lack of food, water, and everything else. But we are staying here, thank God, until now. We are eating simple food, thank God. We need water, food, health care, and for God to lift this curse from Sudan, nothing more than that.
In Somalia, at least 37 people were killed in an attack by al-Shabaab on a popular Mogadishu beach Friday night. The attack, carried out by a suicide bomber and gunmen, injured another 200 people. It's one of the deadliest attacks this year by the al-Qaeda-linked group. Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud has vowed, but so far failed, to eradicate al-Shabaab. Tensions are rising 1 week after the disputed Venezuelan election was called for incumbent President Nicolas Maduro. His main rivals, presidential candidate Edmundo Gonzalez and fellow opposition leader Maria Corina Machado, have repeatedly claimed their party received more votes, releasing its own tally of last Sunday's ballots. The U.S., Argentina, Ecuador, Costa Rica, and Uruguay have recognized Edmundo Gonzalez as president-elect, while Mexico and Brazil are warning external actors against interfering in Venezuela's national affairs. Mass protests in support of Maduro took place across Venezuela this weekend. We'll go to Caracas for more later in the broadcast. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has revoked a plea deal for Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and 2 other men held at Guantanamo accused of plotting the 9/11 attacks. Under the deal, the 3 prisoners had agreed to plead guilty and be sentenced to life in prison. But on Friday, Austin rescinded the deal in a move that will put the death penalty back on the table for the 3 men. We'll have more on this story later in the program. The Biden administration's announced the U.S. government will pay out more than $2 billion to thousands of black farmers and other farmers of color who are discriminated against by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. In a statement, President Biden said, quote, "For too long, many farmers and ranchers experienced discrimination in farm loan programs and have not had the same access to federal resources and support." And Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina are bracing for possible catastrophic flooding from Hurricane Debby, which is expected to make landfall today in the Florida Big Bend area. Some areas could face up to 30 inches of rain in the coming days. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.